commission of that oath is treason, not to cite my attorney in the state's.
Okay, I just wanted to go over some comments. Now, if you watch this video, this guy's citing the laws, and the laws that are commonly broken in every court of law. Okay, but this guy, I don't know why he's making these comments, but he says, attacking the judge and the prosecutor during your trial is always losing strategy. Did I ever have to deal with judicial system? Yeah, 30 years. So if he dealt with the judicial system for 30 years, something tells me this guy is probably trying to say he's a lawyer. Okay? So if he's a lawyer, he knows the rules of professional conduct and the code of judicial conduct is what gives you effective assistance of counsel guaranteed in the 6th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. So I did not tell this guy actually what to say. I gave him a bunch of laws and he put them together. So he didn't believe me. He believed the laws I gave him, and he recited them in the court of law. And this guy says attacking the prosecutor during trial is always a losing strategy. Well, if the prosecutor is violating the rules of professional conduct, they are notoriously infamous for violating Rule 3.8 special rules of the prosecutor. They are not there to prosecute, but to see that justice is served. Their legal obligations are to the defendant as well as the plaintiff to see that due process is carried out, that they get a fair trial, that effective assistance of counsel exists, and effective assistance of counsel only exists if your lawyer goes over with you the rules of professional conduct and the code of judicial conduct, so you know the legal obligations of all lawyers and judges in that court of law, and that nobody violates those laws, the rules of professional conduct and the code of judicial conduct, which they consistently do. All you have to do is look them up, read them. If you ever need a lawyer, I can guarantee you they didn't sit down and talk to you about the rules of professional conduct, their legal obligations to you. It tells you that they're supposed to educate you on that in preamble. So this guy, did I ever have to deal with the judicial system? 30 years. Well, that's only 30 years. I've been pounding these laws in the court since 1979. So I told them, they dropped the case. I started passing out the rules of professional conduct and the code of judicial conduct in 79 and doing my best to expose the injustices of the justice system. I have people in different courts for different things in different states using this conspiracy against rights under the color of law defense. I missed that. But under the color of law defense, what happened to him is happening to everyone. If you're a lawyer, you know you are legally required if you are a lawyer, you know you are legally required to do what I expect. I'm not a lawyer to do what I expect. I'm not a lawyer. Attacking the judges and lawyers' legal obligations to them is not fulfilling them is a perfect strategy. I mean, you walk into court and say, hey, judge, this is your constitutional duties. My constitutional right are your constitutional duties. Same with these attorneys. All attorneys are required to abide by, enforce, and report any misconduct. All judges are required, and it just doesn't happen. So I put, if you're a lawyer, you know the Declaration of Independence says about usurpations. Do you know what the penalties for violating the oath are? I already went over that with you. There's penalties for violating the oath. You know the penalties for deprivation of rights. If your lawyer hasn't discussed the rules of professional conduct and the code of judicial conduct, that's automatically deprivation of rights. All right? That's automatically deprivation of rights. You know, that I told you about. You need informed consent. Informed consent is required before a case can proceed in a court of law, and informed consent requires reasonable knowledge to make an informed decision. And that reasonable knowledge means, actually, what I'm showing you, you need the legal knowledge. you need legal knowledge to make an informed decision to give informed consent. But that's up to you to believe me or not, because none of these laws are being carried out in the court of law. And that's how, they're being tough on crime. They're making people look like criminals by violating the laws in the court of law. And then you have no idea what's going on, what they're doing, what they're saying. Do you know what the penalties for violating? Do you know the penalties for the privation of rights? The penalties for a conspiracy against rights under the law. Under law, if you're a lawyer, you know the privation of rights starts with the counsel for defense not getting informed consent. Getting informed consent requires legal knowledge to make an informed decision, to give informed consent, and he clearly stated that didn't happen. You must be a lawyer. Only a member of the legal learned profession would defend the injustices of the justice system. I encourage people to use their constitutional rights and give them the literature to use. That's all I do. Back in the day, it was hard to get people to read the law. It's on the net now, and I just send them links and supply them with the links for the penalties for violating the law. I posted about that in case you missed it. So I'm not telling people what to say. I'm giving them the law. I'm getting them to read the law. And this guy in the video combined quite a few laws. He wanted to throw the book at him. I said, throw all the books at him. And throw the whole law library at him. But he took a minimal route, but still was rather successful in what he said. But this guy, he sounds like a lawyer. I mean, who would defend, in their right mind, would defend the injustices in the just us system? Okay, 6 replies. That's why I always advise to print out the rules of professional conduct and the code of judicial conduct and highlight everything they didn't do. Go over it with the judge like he did. They literally broke every law in a court of law to make him take a plea, make him look guilty. You do know the requirements of effective assistance of counsel guaranteed in the Sixth Amendment. That's what he was reciting. Go to jail and take the chance of exposing the injustice of the justice system. So what would you do? Go to jail or take the chances of exposing? He took the chances of exposing the injustices of the justice system. The case was dismissed, but the judge and lawyers didn't report each other. I got a guy out of prison on a late notice of appeal in 91 using the same laws. Imagine if everyone walked into court and said that. I do my best to help people, and you? Have you ever had to deal with the judicial system? I did point out all others being broken to get him there. I point out all the laws that were broken again, and he didn't like it. And he said, they can't do that. I said, I know, but they're doing it anyways. And they said, what should I do about it? I says, tell them in court. Tell them in court. But don't tell your lawyer, because your lawyer will tell the judge and the state's attorney or the opposing party, and they'll do everything and anything they can do to keep you from saying what he said in a court of law. Violating the rules and the codes, that's a mandatory go to jail. Fines, removal from public service, and incarceration, which this Stevanik or whatever. So I point out all their being broken to him, but he used the minimum. Granted, most judges and lawyers don't abide by the laws, but when you confront them with it, things change. Be the change, or things remain the same. He said, my 30 years courtroom experience tell me that judges and lawyers do, in fact, abide by the law. Well, I would have to see the records on that. The problem is TikTok is full of pseudo gurus telling people crazy stuff that gets them into trouble. I didn't tell anybody crazy stuff. I just point out the laws. And he's not pointing out any laws to prove. You see all the laws I posted on TikTok, YouTube. A lot of laws lawyers aren't enforcing, abiding by. Same thing with judges. So I says, if reporting misconduct is mandatory and failure to report misconduct as well, yes. Is reporting misconduct mandatory and failure to report as well? Yes, you know any lawyer or judge having any knowledge of misconduct in this case, which is true. Any lawyer or judge having any knowledge of misconduct in any case is required to report it. Violating the rules of professional conduct and code of judicial conduct is against the law. If you are a lawyer, that leaves you legally obligated to report misconduct in this case in this post. You are not limited to whom you report. You are legally report misconduct in any case, but will you? Seriously, are you a lawyer? If you are legally required to report yourself. I actually look up and read the laws, penalties for breaking them, etc. I never asked anyone believe me. I have them read the laws themselves and let them use it if they choose. You want people to take your word over the written law? I give them the law, and you're giving them nothing but your opinion. Did you ever violate the rules of professional conduct or the code of judicial conduct? If you did, you were legally required to report yourself. I just challenge everyone to read the law and use it if they feel the need due to their ineffective assistance of counsel. If you aren't discussing the legal obligations of all lawyers and judges to your clients as prescribed in the preamble, if you are discussing legal obligations of all lawyers and judges to your clients prescribed in the preamble, the rules of professional conduct, you are intentionally violating the oath of public service, the oath of office you took as a lawyer, and aiding and assisting in conspiracy against rights under the color of law. Deprivation of rights always starts with counsel for the defense and the opposing party and judges. And guilty of deprivation of rights because nobody is living up to the standards of the rules and the codes. Everyone not reporting each other themselves clearly proves a conspiracy against rights under the color of law. If not, only proves ineffective assistance to counsel, but ineffective assistance to the court. It not only proves ineffective assistance to counsel, but the ineffectiveness of the court. No effective assistance to counsel, no fair trial, no due process. What are the limitations of a quick and speedy trial? I already passed that about, so let's hear your version. I hold you to the letter of the law on that, and I don't think I have to inform you the penalties for violating the letter of the law. I know these laws. I read about them in the 80s. He's saying he's got 30 years experience, so he goes, back to the mid-90s? But see, I'm giving you the law, and he's just 30. I got 30 years experience. Well, you got 30 years of experience of being ineffective assistance counsel, defective assistance of counsel, destructive assistance of counsel, if you are an attorney. If you're an attorney, I'd really like to get the DOJ in on your ass and find out who you represented and how many times you went over the rules of professional conduct with these clients, if you abided by them. Talk to all your clients and ask them, hey, did your lawyer discuss all this with you? Because, this is the requirements of effective assistance of counsel, But, it's always been that way, people. It's always been that way, That's why it's so easy. This guy's in criminal court. I'm helping some people with family court. People are getting their kids taken away. Kids getting taken away. I was watching some seriously ridiculousness about kids being put in jail. They're in grammar school, and they're given this paper to sign to waive their rights to counsel in a court trial. And so it's just basically they're signing a piece of paper saying, I'm going to jail. No due process whatsoever. And I was listening to it, and the guy was telling some kid had to spend 3 months in grammar school, in jail, juvenile lockup, because of something they posted on the internet about the principal being a dork. So kids actually have no freedom of speech. Is it illegal to call your principal a dork? I mean, it's disrespectful to call him a dork to the face. It's even disrespectful to call him a dork behind their back. But if they're acting like a dork, you know what they say, walk like a duck, talk like a duck. But serious, sometimes older individuals have a habit of abuse of power when it comes to these youngins in school. The abuse of power, it's a thing. It's a thing no matter where you go. I see it on the streets every day. People are constantly reporting videos, posting videos of cops' abuse of power. They're violating the oath. Plenty of times cops tried to grab me walking down the street. What? At a bus stop. And they got a little unruly, but once I mentioned violating the oath. I says, violating the oath, what the penalties are for that? Fines, removed from public service, and incarceration. Excuse me? I said, yeah, the policeman's oath required. You took an oath to the Constitution. The Constitution clearly was written to protect we, the people, from wayward public servants. I said, you remember what the Declaration of Independence said about wayward public servants, those depriving you of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, to remove them and replace them. Okay, but this guy, I guess he's trying to get people not to listen to this guy. Okay, the guy talking in this video, he's not a lawyer. He's just a layman. And all he did was read a bunch of laws I gave him. They're on the internet. I don't have to write that crap down anymore. Now I just give you the link. That's all I did was give him links to a bunch of laws, and he cited them in court. So this guy's saying he got 30 years of experience in the court. Well, that's 30 years of, whoa. 30 years of what? What did he, what could he possibly do? He's got 2 posts. Let's see.
Because none of the arguments you've got apply here. Your travel argument. I'm not buying that. That's never been accepted anywhere that I know of that I've got any reason to follow. I told you.
State officers and they've been doing it for a very long time.
Say that again?
The state is the word that people
I'm not even going to get to what that's all about.
My attorney for ineffective assistance of counsel.
Well, let's go
Reporting
over
misconduct is mandatory in both the Code of Judicial Conduct as well as the Rules of Professional Conduct. The state's attorney should as well then, Your Honor. You took an oath of public service and violation of that oath is treason. Not to cite my attorney and the state's attorney for violating the rules of professional conduct is a violation of that oath. In judicial conduct, you are also legally obligated and required by the Code of Conduct to do so. My attorney and the state's attorney are therefore required to cite you for judicial misconduct upon failure to do so. Informed consent is required before these proceedings can go forward. It is required I have reasonable knowledge to give informed consent, and that reasonable knowledge would be informing me exactly what due process is, and that's explained in the Rules of Professional Conduct and the Code of Judicial Conduct. A fair trial would require everyone in a court of law make sure that I have reasonable knowledge to give informed consent. Now, effective assistance of counsel is a double-edged sword and cuts every way you swing. Every attorney is required to abide by and enforce the rules of conduct as well as judges. Every lawyer and judge are required to abide by and enforce the Code of Judicial as well. Preferential treatment is forbidden in every court of law, and thus far you have given my attorney and the state's attorney preferential treatment, and they you. Let's not forget the requirements of a quick and speedy trial, which has limits. No one has explained any of this to me. With this being recently discovered, I ask that this case be dismissed with prejudice and for all of you to do what's required of law and report each other to the proper authorities. Thank you, Your Honor. My attorney for ineffective assistance of counsel.
Okay, so, I mean, there's a lot of people that know about the laws I'm talking about. That's got to be Title 18, Section 1986 lawsuit. Let's also not forget Section 241 and 242, which is correct. I've spoke on that. I did a video on that. I don't know, last year or something, but this guy never got back to me after I talked to him. He went to court, said what he said. They threw it out. They called him back to court. They made him make a personal appearance, made him go to trial, threw it out. You know, I guess the trial didn't take place. They did to him what they do to everybody. You know, they throw on added charges. Well, if you don't take this, you know, we're going to add on charges and charge you for more, which is legal. That's violating the double jeopardy clause. You know, but, you know, it was just all a scare tactic to get an innocent man to take a guilty plea. So everybody in that courtroom looks like they're doing their job and fighting crime when actually they're hiding innocence. You know, they're nobody's, you know, if you're not playing by the rules and the codes, you know, you're breaking the law. See, so I'm not telling you every judge and every lawyer, but from my experience and everybody I've talked to, and I've talked to a lot of people on the internet, and everybody's complaining about a lack of due process. They didn't get a fair trial. And I keep explaining to them, it's because nobody's abiding by the rules and the codes. That's why you didn't get a fair trial. That's why you didn't get due process. I even tell people, look up a quick and speedy trial. There's limitations to that, and those are never fulfilled. You know how many people can get, let's ask this guy, the Mr. Know-It-All. Where is his name? It disappeared. This guy right here. You know, ask him any questions. Seriously, people, go there and ask him, is he a lawyer? If he's familiar with the rule of professional conduct, the code of judicial conduct. Ask him what the penalties are for. The penalties for violating the rules and the codes are. That's violating the oath. That's the privation of rights. You know. And them nobody reporting each other or themselves, that's a conspiracy against rights under the color of law. Nobody's reporting each other because everybody does it, and if you report one person, they report you. Everybody starts pointing the finger at each other. Everybody has to report each other and each other, and the house of cards fall. Simple as that. But I still advise people always to print out the rule of professional conduct and the code of judicial conduct and highlight everything they didn't do. And there's a lot of didn't do's that they're supposed to be doing. So in this guy in the video, look at the privation of rights. Look up the privation of rights. Look up penalty for the privation of rights. Look up a conspiracy against rights under the color of law. Then look up penalties for conspiracy against rights under the color of law. So this guy trying to discourage people, he'll never discourage me. I've been doing this since 1979. But this guy, he says he's got 30 years experience. So people, contact this guy and ask him about all these laws I post. Ask him what's the penalties for violating the oath. Because, you know, in order to be a lawyer, you have to take an oath, right? Look up a lawyer's oath. A lawyer, anybody in public service, there's the oath of public service. So that's first and mandatory. Then there's the oath of office. The judge takes an oath, you know, to be a judge. Lawyers take an oath to be a judge. Judges can be held both to, you know, the oath of a judge and a lawyer, you know. But all in all, all judges and lawyers are required to abide by the rules of professional conduct. Any violations, it's mandatory to report that misconduct. It's mandatory. It says in the rules and the codes. And I can guarantee you this, I don't know if he's a lawyer. He won't say if he is, because if he is, he knows he is legally obligated He's legally obligated to report the
Reporting
lawyers
misconduct is
and the
mandatory in both
judge
the Code of
that
Judicial
handled this
Conduct
case.
as well as the rules of professional conduct.
So if he is a lawyer,
the state's attorney should as well
everybody
then,
hit him
Your
up.
Honor.
If you're a lawyer,
You took an oath
why
of
aren't
public
you
service in
reporting
violation of that oath is treason.
everybody
not
sees
to
it's
cite my
happening.
attorney and the state's attorney for violating the rules.
Everybody sees it's happening. You know, if you look penalties for deprivation of rights, it'll tell you where to file a complaint. A lot of government agencies, and they are witnessing it. They're watching it just as well as you and I of this happening. Everybody's getting deprivation of rights. A conspiracy against rights under the color of law. Look it up. If you have any court case, look it up. If you have anything, any dealings with the court, even if you don't, come on, they're so petty and pathetic. You literally have to opt out for people selling your information on the internet. Legally, that should be an opt-in, and you should be compensated for somebody selling your personal information, your thoughts, you know, your travels on the internet. But it wasn't until recently where people, you know, started saying, hey, why is this happening? And then the government finally got involved, and, you know, the lawyers and the judges finally got involved, but that was illegal to begin with. That's highway robbery. On the internet highway. They had no legal right to amass this information and use your personal information for ill-gotten gains. But before you listen to any attorney, please read the law. Anything they say, take an iPad with you, take your smartphone with you, and anything they say, you can literally look it up. You know, some lawyer got mad at me about housing court and wanted to discuss consultation fees. I says, okay, before we discuss consultation fees, I says, let's sit down and discuss the rules of professional conduct. He says, what do you mean? I said, you're a lawyer, right? He said, yeah. I says, okay. The rules of professional conduct are your legal obligations to your clients and the public in general. True? He said, I don't want to carry this on, and he just hung up. Lawyers will not talk to you about the rules of professional conduct. Judges will not. Why do you think you never heard of them? You know, there was a big problematic thing with, you know, the Supreme Court not having a code of judicial conduct. And that was in the interest of the bar. That was so that, you know, there were clients that can afford it and keep appealing this case all the way up to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has no code of conduct. They think they can rule any which way they want, and nobody got nothing to say about it. But then again, if you look up the basic obligations of public service, they still have that. They violate the basic obligations of public service, the oath of office. They still have the oath of office, the U.S. Supreme Court, and that oath of office and the oath they took as a judge requires them to do what's in the public interest, to do what's in the needs of the many, not the greed of the few, and they still do it. Now, if this guy's a lawyer, he could explain that to you. I'm not a lawyer. To be honest with you, I started out because I'm a fanatic for history. Everything I read about, I had to find out the who, what's, where's, and why's. When I read the Constitution back in 71 and read all these names, I had to know the who, what, where's, and why's. That led me to the Declaration of Independence. That led me to understand the rule of law and why the Declaration of Independence was written, which took me even further back to the history of the Magna Carta, the history of the rule of law. And the rule of law was established to abolish qualified immunity, so qualified immunity can't exist. And here in the United States, they started throwing it around during the civil rights movements in '56, Pearson versus Ray, where some cops arrested some white Pentecostal preachers for sitting with some black preachers and at a bus station, and the cops arrested them because they wanted the white preachers to leave the coloreds only section. And they said, no, we're just sitting here talking, having coffee, waiting for everybody to leave, everybody's going to go about their way. The police said, no, you got to get out of this. Is coloreds only. You're white. Legally, you can't be here. And they tried to tell them, no, that's not a law. And they wound up getting arrested. And they cut them loose. But the judge didn't do nothing to the police. He says because it was in good faith. They thought it was the law. So they used this thing called the good faith measure. They were doing in good faith because they thought it was a law. So they thought they should enforce it. That wasn't the law. Jim Crow law. But not it violated the United States Constitution. And as everybody knows, or should know, that any law repugnant to the U.S. Constitution and is null and void, can't be enforced, is illegal. It's illegal to even suggest making a law that violates the United States Constitution, law of the land. A lot of things lawyers won't express to you, let you know. When you hire a lawyer, all you're doing is, for the most part, every time I tried to get a lawyer to work for me, all I was hiring, the only thing I got out of them in that hiring was their name, their brand, to get them to abide by the rules of professional conduct and get other lawyers to abide by it, enforce rules of professional conduct, get the judge to abide by and enforce code. That's nearly impossible. That's going to cost you mega bucks, mucho money. There's a term that lawyers like to use, billable items. And they do everything they can to create it. And it starts with deprivation of rights. When you hire them not going over their constitutional duties, basically what they're supposed to do in defending your constitutional rights. Your constitutional rights are their constitutional duties. They took an oath to do that. Simple as that. But every now and then, I get people like this guy. Attacking a judge and prosecutor during his trial is nearly always a losing strategy. This guy won. Granted, the judge didn't report the lawyers or himself, and the lawyers didn't report each other and the judge as well as themselves. Nobody reported each other for a conspiracy against rights under the color of law. But at least they threw the case out. But still, who were the criminals? Who were the criminals? They took an innocent man and did everything they did to make him look guilty. I know they pressured him into a plea deal. Just take this, and you won't get so much time, And he didn't, so they compounded the charges. They kept adding charges. I know, I've been through that. I've helped other people through that. That's violating the double jeopardy clause. You can't threaten to charge a person with more crimes because they won't take a plea deal. That's illegal. But your lawyer will allow it to happen. The state's attorney will do it, or the opposing party. The judge won't say nothing. But I already did a video on violating the double jeopardy clause and the penalties, people. Okay, so, you can listen to the lawyers and judges who aren't telling you all these laws I'm telling you about. And I never asked any of you to believe me. I gave you the law. I looked it up on the internet, and I read it to you, word for word, to the letter, according to the letter of law. And you damn well know the violations of violating the letter of law, right? Look up penalties for violating the letter of law. So I definitely wouldn't want to go to jail for violating the letter of the law. Ask this guy if he's ever violated the letter of the law. I guess he's a lawyer. He won't say. I asked him, are you a lawyer? He won't say, because he knows if he's a lawyer, then he's quite literally violating the law. He's acknowledging that laws are being broken.
Professional conduct is a violation of that oath.
And reporting misconduct is mandatory, and there's no limitations on that. It doesn't say only in the courts you appear in. Only if you're in the presence. You see it on TV. You read it in the papers. you know of any judicial misconduct, any professional misconduct, it's your legal, well, as a lawyer, it's their legal obligations to report it. Doesn't matter what state they're in. Doesn't matter if it's federal. Doesn't matter if it's local. If they have any knowledge, any lawyer and any judge that has any knowledge of any misconduct, any violations of the rules of professional conduct and the code of judicial conduct, that's automatic. That's a deprivation of rights. Them not telling you is a deprivation of rights. Them not expressing it. Did anybody tell you you have a right to a quick and speedy trial? Does anybody even ask? No. I keep telling you people, all of you, I care about all of you. Sure, people say, oh, well, it's the justice. No, I want a justice system that has equal justice for all. There's always preferential treatment. There's always preferential treatment. They'll send. There's always preferential treatment, depending on your case. But look up all these laws I post about, and you'll be saying the same thing as this guy. It was brief, a minute and a half, but he took the laws I gave to him, and I didn't charge him. People have even asked me if they could donate money. No, I don't ask for except donations. I'm a God-fearing man. God knows what charity is as much as I do. And I took on the what would Jesus attitude. What would Jesus do attitude when it comes to this? And I'll tell you, not that I feel like him, but I kind of know what he feels like, when you create a smile. When you make somebody feel good about themselves. I'm not into tearing people down. I'm into bringing them up. What I'm doing is not a handout, it's a hand up. But it's a legal requirement of all your public servants. That's what I'm trying to tell you. That's what I'm trying to show you people. I don't know who this knucklehead is. I don't mean to be calling people names. But he's trying to seem like a genius, I guess a stable genius. But it's up to you to decide for yourselves. If you got a court case going on, no matter what court it's in, just Google or whatever search engine you have. Use a search engine, Google the rules of professional conduct. Google rules of professional conduct complaint form. Google the Code of Judicial Conduct, or Google the Code of Judicial Conduct complaint form, and it'll take you to agencies where, and don't forget, violating the rules and the codes are also ethics violations. And don't forget to mention violating the oath, the penalties for they violated the oath, penalties for violating the oath. Don't forget to mention deprivation of rights. Everybody's guilty of deprivation of rights, and throw in the penalties for deprivation of rights. And since they all work together, a conspiracy against rights under the color of law, and look up that and offer the penalties for conspiracy against rights under the color of law. Mention how they violated the letter of the law. Mentioned how they violated the rule of law. There's penalties for violating the letter of the law. There's penalties for violating the rule of law. Things I would have liked this guy to give me answers to. You see, I asked him questions and he wouldn't answer them. He wouldn't even say if he was a member of the legal learned profession that call themselves lawyers, attorneys. The legal term is counselor, assistance of counsel. That's why it says in the rules of professional conduct, assistance of counsel. If your lawyer isn't doing his job, he's ineffective assistance of counsel. If he is abiding by the rules and the codes, then he's effective assistance of counsel, and you can't do diddly squat, ding dang do. Pick that up from the South. But hey, I like visiting people in the South. Used to. But it's ridiculous having a conversation about the law with a lawyer that won't even tell you the penalties for violating these laws. They won't even tell you, hey, we're legally supposed to do this, you know. I mean, lots of times judges make up laws up on the stand. It's not actually a law. I'm not saying every time, but I've witnessed it. And, I mean, literally, when you're in a courtroom, you have to be on a computer to see if these laws are actually laws, to see who's violating what, you know. But before you ever walk into a courtroom, before you ever speak to a lawyer, if you're going to hire a lawyer, I can't how many times people ask me throughout the years, they figure since I know much about the law, so much about the law, that I would know some good attorneys. But, you know, I've only spoken to one attorney that's ever sat down and talked to me about the rules of professional conduct, the code of judicial conduct, and all these other. We joked and we laughed about it, and I hired him. He laughed because he wanted to know what I needed a lawyer for. I said, nothing right now. He said, well, why are you here? I says, you know, because I'm going to need you sometime in the future. He says, well, what do you mean? He said, you know, thought I was in a cartel. I said, no, you know, I got arrested, you know, going to school, from school, going to work, coming home from work, you know. Cops like to stop me, check my pockets, empty them, you know, take what cash I have, empty my wallet. Because I don't let them do that. You know, I'm going to jail for resisting arrest. And he just looked at me and said, come on, you know how it is. Yeah, I do. I'm ashamed to say. So he openly admitted that he knew the way, you know, the ways of law enforcement. And I was later told he was a cop as well. But anyways, I hired him. I don't hate cops. I don't hate lawyers. I just don't like anybody that doesn't abide by the law. Especially in a court of law, law enforcement. It's against the law. But only one attorney. His name's Thomas Bennett. Thomas Bennett. Good guy. He laughed, but he agreed with me. You know, being Mexican in this country quite literally means upon birth, you need a lawyer, you need a family lawyer, you know. You need a lawyer to walk you to school. You need a lawyer to walk you to the store to get the paper for your dad. When I was a little kid, my dad sent me to the paper to go get the papers. Chicago Daily News. The store was a block and a half away. I got there and coming back, some guy grabbed me, threw me in a grown adult man, threw me into a doorway. I slammed into the doorway head first, fell, and I felt somebody throwing something at me. It turns out it was accelerant, and they started flicking matches at me, scared the hell out of me. I seen one match coming at me, and it got so big, and it was slow motion. I could see it spark as it starts to fly. I could hear it. Granted, I was a little kid. I was only 8 or 9 years old. But I've seen enough movies to know that once that match hits me, I'm gone. I don't know where I got the strength, but I took off running. It was right on the corner of my house. And when I got home banging on the door, and my dad opened the door, and the guys turned around and walked away. They were grown men. Lived right on the corner of our house. And they walked away. My dad beat my ass, said him and my mom said I was a firebug or trying to start a fire, and where's the newspaper, and you know, it wasn't until they finally calmed down, and my mom asked me for my clothes because, you know, I smelled like accelerant. I think it was kerosene. I don't know, I was a little kid. I didn't know this, you know, gas was leaded back then, you know. I mean, it was like a garage that they were next to, so I don't know. It could have been gasoline, kerosene, you know. But still, you know, just, I just learned that I needed a lawyer at a very young age. I couldn't afford one even after I hired Thomas Bennett. And the only thing I could do was learn all these laws, which I started to learn these laws, most of them. I started once I read the Constitution in 71, the Declaration of Independence I read in 71. I found the Magna Carta towards the end of 71. I spent 72 finding as much information I could as about the Magna Carta and the wars that followed trying to achieve the rule of law. You know, the rule of law has a long history. It's not just U.S. history, it's world history. But either way, this gentleman here in the video, he was didn't throw out as many laws as I wanted, but he threw out enough. He made his point that what was done to him was under the color of law, and considering how many people were involved, it was a conspiracy against rights under the color of law. You know, they violated the oath. Right there, they violated the oath of public service. That's another law. You know, I mean, it's just countless. And we're gonna get these knuckleheads right here. It says attacking a judge and prosecutor during your trial is nearly always a losing strategy. He wasn't attacking them. No, you're breaking the law. And when I had a judge that will get you dead unalived real quick. You know, if there's not cameras in there, and if there's not a bunch of people in there knowing what you're talking about without them knowing that they're there with you. You can't go in there alone. I had to go it alone. And I got convicted because they withheld evidence. They said they didn't need no evidence. They didn't need no witnesses. You know, the judge didn't like witnesses, didn't like evidence, didn't want to go over the police report. Decided they didn't need the cop to testify because he couldn't testify to what was in his police report. Because they originally started me with some lame charge, and then they upped it, and then they said, okay, you don't take this plea deal, we're going to throw more charges on you. And they didn't like me bringing up violating the double jeopardy clause. They didn't like me bringing up a lot of things. And after conviction, they took me into the bullpen, you know. So anyways, I was supposed to go back into the courtroom, and I was pissed. And the lawyer said, don't worry about it, we can beat this out on appeal. And he said that to me during the trial, before conviction, so I knew something was amiss. And so I was in the back in the bullpen. I was pissed. I said, "What? You guys are criminals. You're the super predators." I said, "Wait till I get out there and see what happens." He says, "Oh yeah, what's gonna happen?" I said, "Wait till I get out there." I said, I wanted to cuss him out, but I didn't. I tend to refrain from that. He said, what could you possibly say to change the judge's mind? I said, reporting misconduct is mandatory in the rules of professional conduct and the code of judicial conduct. And he shot out of there. Because any decent lawyer, anybody that's ever graduated law school can tell you, if you can prove ineffective assistance of counsel, you can prove deprivation of rights. And if you can prove ineffective assistance of counsel, you can prove a conspiracy against rights under the color of law, because the opposing party and the judge didn't report your attorney for ineffective assistance of counsel, which is mandatory in the rules and the codes. So them not reporting your attorney for not doing his job, that's their job, to report your attorney for not doing his job, to fight back, And so they don't report him, and they're breaking the law. So I mean, if you really want to get the gist of what made this guy go in court and say that, you'll understand once you read the rules and the codes and find out none of that is happening, and go make this guy, whatever his name is, right here. I get a lot of scam calls. It's attacking a judge and a prosecutor during the trial. No, it's not a, no. Telling them, hey, do your job? That's not a good strategy. You're not doing your job. How come you're not doing your job? This is your job description right here. How come you're not doing that? That's a bad strategy. As long as you don't tell your lawyer that you're going to say that, you'll be safe. My mistake was telling my lawyer before I stepped in front of the judge. And the judge had the county sheriffs come in and take me back to county jail. I wasn't going back to court, and I was like, holy shit, I know what's going to happen now. I opened my mouth too soon. In the elevator, right down, they were mad dogging me, talking shit to me. I thought I was going to die there. Walking through the tombs from the court back to the county jail, I swear to God, I knew I was walking the Green Mile. I knew I was going to face my execution. I just didn't know how bad it was going to be. I thought they were going to get me there in the tombs. They waited until they actually got me back to Cook County Jail. And I actually got to the phone and wanted to talk. My dad was the only person I was ever close to, you know. And I wanted to call my dad and say goodbye. And a brother-in-law answered the phone. Like, let me talk to my dad. Let me talk to my dad. Let me talk to my dad. Because my dad and I, we spoke about these laws I speak to the internet about. My dad loved hearing about how much I knew. I got a lawsuit dropped against me and him by what I knew. Just talking to his lawyer over the phone. So do not tell your lawyer, because if you're going to say this in front of the judge, because your lawyer will tell the judge, and the opposing party. And if they get you in the bullpen, you're dead. You're going to wind up dead or near dead like me. That's why I suffer from PTSD. I have these massive migraines. Last time I was in the hospital, they called in the family to say goodbye. You know, I would ask for a preacher, but I don't know any. And but that was from the beating I took. They tried to cave they didn't just try to break every bone in my body was hurting. My joints, my knees, my ankles, my hands were fucked up. My fingers were kind of crooked. My toes were. But the worst feeling I had was when they were stomping my head, kicking my head. In the area of a dozen people, while I was handcuffed, passed out on the ground, face down. And that shit'll wake you up. That much pain. They knocked me out from pain, and that was a low blow to the gonads, you know. Straight shot to the baby maker. You know, and that was an unfortunate moment to have testicles. But very painful, very painful. I thought I was going to die. I wanted to die. I begged God to release me from my pain. I kept begging him, Father, take me home. I'm ready. Father, bring me home. Sheriffs are actually laughing at me. Oh, he's calling for his daddy, because that's who I was trying to contact, was my dad. I wanted to say goodbye. It's the only person I had to say goodbye to. And before he got on the phone, I was attacked. I don't know how long it went on. I was brutally beaten. Brutally. You know, it was a few months before I stopped begging the Almighty to release me from my pain. I offered nothing. It's when I decided to offer to finish what I started, continue to do what I do, and that's teaching people what I do. And I'm actually teaching them. I'm just giving them a lot of laws. Here, read this, read this, read this, read this. That ain't happening. This didn't happen. That didn't happen. I said, okay, now look up the penalties for that. And I'm not doing that. And I get a whole lot of upset people. So no, I'm not trying to represent anybody in court. Because I'm not a lawyer. But what I am doing is getting them to express their constitutional rights and get everybody to live up to their constitutional duties. It's time to get constitutionally correct. That's all I'm doing. You know, everybody abide by the laws. In a nation of laws, all laws should matter, and every penalty should be imposed against those that violate any and every of those laws. So I'm strictly speaking to you as a layman. Okay, a lot of people ask me, are you a lawyer? No, why should I believe you? I never asked you to believe me. I asked you to believe your eyes. Just read the freaking law. Some people yell at me. Why do I gotta know this if they know that's their job? Well, they know you know that. They know that you don't know what their job is, so they're basically gonna do whatever the hell they want. You know, and then lawyers have argued with me about the quick and speedy trial. No, that's only in criminal case. Not according to the rules of professional conduct. Excuse me, aren't you required to be diligent? Well, I said, expediting litigation. What are the mandatories behind that? I said, that would be competent, wouldn't it? If not being diligent and failure to expedite litigation, that is not competent, thus making you what? Incompetent. That's breaking the law. You know, I mean, once you read the rules and the codes, you'll find out how easy they are to use and how nobody's doing. This guy that I ever have to deal with the judicial system, 30 years, and I bet you in his 30 years he's never once cited an attorney for ineffective assistance of counsel, or a judge for judicial misconduct, a prosecutor for prosecutorial misconduct, never once cited anybody for deprivation of rights or conspiracy against rights under the color of law. It's just what they do. People, the justice system is the just us system. Just us public servants against those who took an oath to serve and protect. Remember, violating the oath also has its penalties: fines, removal of public service, and incarceration. Every law I talk to you about has penalties. Something this guy refuses to answer. Why won't he answer? That's kind of astounding.
In judicial conduct, you are also legally obligated and required by the Code of Conduct to do so. My attorney...
Man, that's a whole lot of law breaking there. You know how many laws and the rules and the codes were broken? That's a whole lot of law breaking. So you tell me, who are the super predators? Who are the super predators? You know, quite literally a political prisoner because of politics. Politics say, hey, let's get rough on crime. And the only way they could amass the numbers to achieve the statistics that they do is through deprivation of rights a conspiracy against rights, and that's always under the color of law. Ask that guy; he'll tell you. He's a lawyer, you know. And hey, check it out. If you read the rules of professional conduct, you know, honesty, integrity, you know, truth, they're not legally allowed to lie. So read the penalties of these crimes that they break. Ask them, hey, you know, you ever make sure anybody went to jail? Look at it. Here it says, you know, fines, penalties. The penalties are fines, removal of public service, incarceration, violating the letter of law. Look up penalties for violating the letter of the law. The penalties include fines, removal of public service, and incarceration. And in the case of death, in case that decision caused a death, they get the death penalty. Yep. So you hear about everybody talking about disinformation, misinformation. You could stop that. You can stop that. Just remind everybody about the penalties of violating the letter of the law. It's on the internet, and I did a video on it. Look it up. It's not that big of a law. It's not that hard to understand. You don't have to be a stable genius. You don't need all that critical thinking. All you need is the reading comprehension of a fifth grader and pure logic. And remember, if any law is illogical, it's illegal, because all laws, according to the Constitution, the rules, the codes, all laws are supposed to be in the public interest. Google, what does the Constitution say about the greater good? Okay, I used to explain that, but now with the internet, it throws all this stuff together like I used to. Makes it a lot easier on me. Okay, so Google, what does the Constitution say about the greater good? The Constitution was written to serve the greater good, not the needs of the few. All public servants are required to do what's in the public interest, not self-interest, interest or of the bar or parochial interest. No laws can be made, you know, for religious reasons, for religious purposes. You know, like overturning Roe versus Wade. They literally injected their religious values into the lives of everybody else. So first read the rules of professional conduct and the code of judicial conduct. And even in the code of judicial conduct, it tells you, because, you know, that was going on there, you know, it was a big political thing. Trump even said, look at, I overturned Roe versus Wade, and in the Code of Judicial Conduct says they can't make decisions based on parochial interest, and they can't allow people to come in there with their political witch hunts, you know, and they did, and they did. They overturned Roe versus Wade, and it was in a parochial interest, the interest of the bar, because the lawyers made a whole lot of money, even though they knew they shouldn't have played with that. Roe versus Wade allowing legal abortions was in the interest of the public, okay, because when it was going on, people were dying. Read up on the Jane movement. They all amassed in Chicago. That's what made me familiar about it, because I was a kid, but I used to get into politics, law, history. I love history. Always read everything I could about it. And so it was made in the public interest, because women were still getting abortions, traveling to places unknown, going to parts unknown to get an abortion, which they didn't know if it was actually medical procedures. Some women were dying. Women were getting, from what I read, coat hangers shoved up to them and stirred around like a mixer, and, you know, drinking fluids to kill the fetus, but actually they were killing themselves, poisoning themselves. And, you know, there was so many ridiculous homemade, you know, wives' tales about, you know, getting an abortion, and people were dying, and people were making money, a lot of money off these illegal abortions. So the general consensus was, hey, let's make it legal. Let's do it in a hospital where nobody has to die. And women weren't doing it just because, I mean, there was so many different reasons, you know. The reasoning behind why women get aborted, it's nobody has the same reason. Some is because of medical issues. Some are because they're just damn little kids, you know. But no, that was created in the public interest. Overturning it was in a parochial interest, which is forbidden in the rules of professional conduct, you know. In the Code of Judicial Conduct, if you read the preamble, they are required to do what's in the public interest. Overturning Roe versus Wade wasn't in the public interest. It was in a parochial interest, and it was a political scheme. And if you read the Code of Judicial, judges are strictly forbidden from involving themselves in politics, especially when it comes to the law. And they were required to be apolitical. They can't be conservative, Democrats, or what have you. You know, they're required to go by the law. You know, and like I said, remember, if you Google what does the Constitution say about the greater good, it'll say that, you know, everybody is working, all public servants work to do what's in the public interest, not in self-interest, not in their own interest. And if you read the basic obligations of public service, you'll find out a lot of money that has been going into politics never should have. A lot of things should have, you know, like negotiating. Hey, you know, politicians telling some big company, hey, I'll do this, but you know, got to kick money into my campaign, hire my cousin Ned, you know, and my sister's husband Jed, and you know, over there, my neighbor Hezekiah. You know, no. See, but you know, it's a give and trade when it comes to politics and corporations, but that's forbidden in the basic obligations of public service. There's a lot of things forbidden in the basic obligations of public service that nobody's abiding by, living up to, enforcing, or reporting any of that malfeasance. That's all I'm trying to get you to do. And I mean, if you want to listen to a lawyer, you're going to get what you get. But I want you to listen to yourselves, you know, by reading these laws that I give to you. I'm not telling you what to say. I'm not telling you what to think. I'm just getting you to open your eyes and think for yourself. And seriously, go by the letter of the law. It's a legal requirement. There are penalties for violating that. Okay, I don't want you to go to jail like all these lawyers and judges should go to jail for violating the letter of the law, for violating the oath, for violating the rule of professional conduct, the Code of Judicial Conduct. You know, that's deprivation of rights, and considering the fact they're all doing it, it's a conspiracy against rights under the color of law. Look up under the color of law. That's against the law. To act under the color of law. Look up for penalties for that. You know, I've did videos on it. Just reading you the law. Like I said, you can listen to those lawyers, or you can listen to yourself, because they all will tell you, you know, don't believe your lying eyes. They'll tell you, you know, that doesn't mean what you think it means. I've had people say they were, I got chased out of some courts downtown. I just had to check it out, federal court. And I got chased out of there for questioning everything that was going on. So yeah, you know, it's the rules and the codes. They're standard in every court. Okay. I had some wackadoo lawyers tell some people I was trying to help. No, that's only for criminal court. No, the rules and codes are for all courts. There's one special rule added for criminal court. That's Rule 3.8, Special Rules of the Prosecutor. That one's only for criminal court, but all the rest of the rules apply in every court. state, federal, traffic. I went to traffic court. The judge was pissed because I showed up. And I get the tickets thrown out. They were mad because people just pay. Nobody comes to court. He was mad because I had a judge get mad when I showed up to traffic court because she had to get on her robe and come out. And I guess she was playing Etch-a-Sketch or Twister or Tiddlywinks in the back. I don't know. But I was the only one there. And she was literally upset that I didn't pay the fine, a couple $100. And I told her, no, I didn't see no parking sign. It was raining, So I forgot about. I think it was a female. She laughed. Oh yeah, well I'll just see to that. And she clicked on something, and I think it was a video that was on the street cleaner. They got video cameras of every. They take pictures of every car that's on their route that isn't moved. And she looked at the video and says, "Okay, you can go." Fine dismissed or whatever, But there was no sign out there. She didn't tell me. She didn't show me the video. I think she was even more pissed after looking at the video, but let me go and, dismissed the ticket for illegal parking, where they were street cleaning. But she did mention what I had that I was holding. What's that? I says, the Code of Judicial Conduct, the Rules of Professional Conduct. Because believe it or not, even though you're not a lawyer, judges will hold you to the legal obligations of lawyers. They will, the Rule of Professional Conduct. That happened to me in Court for Workman's Comp. My lawyer quit because I brought up violating the rules of codes. The judge didn't like it. And the judge started complaining about the time. He was yelling at me about the time it took. You're wasting, how much time we had to this, wasting my time. Oh, lack of diligence? Talking about late filing paperwork? Oh. So, expediting litigation. That was my lawyer's job, but he didn't do it. He didn't communicate that. When he got mad when I started forcing the communication with him, and communication is mandatory in the rules of professional conduct, not communicating with your client is against the law. But the judge wasn't having none of it. He didn't like nobody bringing up all the laws that lawyers break and judges break. And I couldn't get disability. I'm disabled. And I couldn't get the further medical treatment I needed. The judge said that he'll give me so much money and it'll cut it short if I want to go get more medical treatment. The problem with getting medical treatment is I couldn't get a doctor to give me a referral to see a specialist to get the MRIs to see how much damage was done. It wasn't until I got Medicaid and Medicaid, or Medicare, the red, white, blue card. I had to sue Social Security, and I used the rules and the codes to beat them as well. 9 years, 3 appeals, shot me down, sued them, called stupid because I sued Social Security. But in the end, the courts ruled in my favor. But the lawyers only put in for supplemental. I got a little upset about that. He said, well, I don't think the judge is going to give you this or that. You maybe get supplemental. You definitely won't get your red, white, and blue card. I pulled out the rules and the codes and said, let's see what happens. And I actually had copies of the complaint forms. I said, well, let's see when I go inside. He said, what could you possibly tell the judge that would change his mind? And this judge was bitchy, pissy. His knickers were in a twist like you wouldn't believe. It was worse than that movie Twister. There was a storm up his ass, but he was mad because here we are back in court. He said, I don't know what happened. Somebody sued us. I guess we lost, so we're back. Real nasty attitude. which is forbidden in the Code of Judicial Conduct if you read the preamble. You know, there was no decorum. No decorum. The lack of mannerism was outstanding. But he bitched and he complained. Him and the opposing party, 2.5, 3.5 hours. They were going for a long time, lambasting me. My lawyer not saying a thing. And I let it go. I have my turn to speak. So the judge called for, recess. 15-minute recess or something. I went out for a sidewalk. The lawyer come out and says, I don't think you're going to get anything. He says, you'll be lucky if you get supplemental. You'll be lucky if you get 5 years back pay. You're not going to get Medicare. And that's when I mentioned the rules and the codes. And if I don't get what I want, my 10 years back pay, my red, white, and blue card, so I can continue getting the medical treatment that I need, because there's other insurance, no. They said, no, all I need is a bunch of drugs. So when I mentioned that I had the rules and the codes, and this is what I was going to discuss when I went back in, he ran back in and told the judge, before I finished my cigarette, he came back out and told me, you won, you got it. You got your 10 years back pay, you got your red, white, and blue card, and he walked away. And I think he went back in there and got his ass chewed out by the judge. I don't know. They didn't let me back in. And I did. I got 10 years back pay, and I got my red, white, and blue card. Just bringing up the rules and the codes, the laws in the court of law that nobody abides by. All right. So before you listen to some stable genius that says, hey, I'm a lawyer, read up their legal responsibilities. Go over it with them. If you're hiring a lawyer for anything, if they're a good lawyer, they will go over the rules and the codes with you. They will explicitly entertain you about the legal responsibilities of all lawyers and judges. So thus far, you're living under the color of law. All right. And I did a video on the color of law. My God, people, I'm sorry to rant, but, seriously, if you're going to talk to a lawyer, me and my dad, we go a long way back talking about the law. Boy, he used to laugh and laugh and laugh, and I would talk to lawyers, talk about lawyers. And he always called them legal liars. Last time he talked to a lawyer wanted to help him with something, I forgot what. And my dad wanted to discuss the rules. The lawyer quit calling him. I had a few people threaten to sue me. Got lawyers. The lawyer's calling me, we could settle out. And then when I start going over the rules of professional conduct, they capitulate. Somebody stole my identity. The only thing they could prove were the lawyers that my identity was stolen. I started questioning as to, the people who offered this loan, whatever. I said, did they do their due diligence? And did they find out if it was actually me? Did the money go to me? Did it go into my bank account? Were they contacted using my phone number, my address? And first they were telling me, well, legally, federal law says we can't give you that information. When I started citing the rules of professional conduct, is that what you call expediting litigation? In fairness to the opposing party, expediting litigation is mandatory. That would be competent. I started throwing the rules around. What? I says, you do understand. I says, are you a lawyer? And, oh, well, we're litigation. So you're lawyers and you know the rules of professional conduct. And you know quite well violating the rules of professional conduct is illegal. That's also violating the oath you took as a lawyer. You violated the oath of public service. And they started apologizing. Don't worry. I mean, first they are, you just give us this money and we won't sue you. You know, but, I mean, reporting lawyers for misconduct, it's hard. So I need as many people as possible, to learn the rules, the codes, and report all these lawyers and judges for breaking the laws in a court of law. That's the only way things are going to change. When you go in court, do like this guy and get your case tossed out. No matter what court you're in. He cited the state's attorney, but if it's not a criminal case, you can use the term the opposing party. The opposing party did not report my attorney for ineffective assistance of counsel or the judge for judicial misconduct or themselves for multiple counts of the rules of professional conduct. Reporting misconduct is mandatory in the rules of professional conduct. So they're legally required to report themselves. They're legally required to report any misconduct that they notice, see, anywhere. It's not limited to the court they're standing in. No, it's anywhere, anytime, any place. Whether they see it on TV, read about it in the papers, they are legally required to report that. And they don't. I'm sorry for taking so long, but I woke up and I was a little upset where this lawyer was expressing the strategies of lawyers. Yeah, well, there's strategies to keep you in the dark, which is illegal. If you read the rules of professional conduct, them not telling you anything about anything is illegal. That's one thing this guy, what the hell is his name? Yeah, I put this guy as a protege. I do this page, Legal Reform, the beginning. It was actually for me and my siblings, so I can explain all this stuff to them. But they think because they don't know what I don't know, that I don't know what I know, because they don't know what I know and the things I've been through. And they like to tell stories about what they heard. You weren't there, how would you know? And then when I try to explain to you, well, you're not a lawyer, how would you know? I know I'm not a lawyer, but I could read. And I even tried to show them these laws. When I read it to them, they all excited, all happy, and all smiles. And when I hand it to them, I don't understand the law. I think it's because they can't read or write. I'm not sure. They're older, I didn't go to school with them. Luckily enough for me, my older sister taught me to read and write before I started school. So I became an avid reader since I learned to read. And, I didn't have much friends because I wasn't allowed to do much. Wasn't allowed to do much kid stuff because, I had older siblings preventing me, They call it the rite of passage to brutalize and make the lives of their younger siblings hell. They thought it was cool. I thought they were fools. But we never talked. We never sat down and discussed it. We never read a book together. The only time we watched a movie together is when our mother made us sit and watch movies together, and that never worked out very well, we just never got along. But, so Legal Reform at the beginning was supposed to be for me and my family, and it was a closed group, but I tried to make it a public group because my siblings left, because I think they were upset because I was posting laws, but not reading them, just posting the laws, trying to get people to read them. And nobody would read them, so that's why I started the videos, reading them to people. But all my siblings and their children and their spouses, they all left the room. So I figured, well, if they don't want to learn, I've been teaching other people. Let's see how many people I could attract to, get them to learn what their, constitutional rights are, their birthrights, And I've been doing a pretty good job. And all I'm doing is getting them to read, getting people to read. That's the hard part, getting them to read it. That's why I read it for a lot of people. And I know there's a lot of people that can't read or write. That's why I read it. And hopefully they can find somebody, because there's so many of you. And most of you people I talk to are from different states. I don't have the money to get to you. I'm not a lawyer, so I can't represent you in court. And I'm not trying to get you to represent yourself. I'm trying to get you to stand up for yourself. Okay, and the only way you're going to get through this, the only way you'll be able to give informed consent is if you obtain the legal knowledge to make an informed decision before you give informed consent in any court of law. Nothing but love for you. This is a shout out to all my people, we the people. If you don't stand up for yourself, nobody's going to do it for you. All right? I wish I could be there for you. And legally, I can't speak up for you in a court of law, and if I did, the judge would cite me for contempt of court, which I've been cited for contempt of court many a time without saying a word, just being there. The lawyer's telling on me to the judge, look at that, there's that crazy Mexican, and they won't stop telling our clients their legal rights and how we're breaking the law. I don't hear the conversations, but I mean, how is it a judge, can pick me out between a courtroom full of people and just stare at me and just mad dog me, give me the osos. And then when these people that I talk to come up, then I get yelled at. If I was there with him when he went to court, this guy here went to court, the judge probably would have been yelling at me and threatened to cite me with contempt of court. I got yelled at for just sitting in court. You got a case here? What do you want then? You ain't got no case. Judges don't like witnesses in their court. That's why they don't like cameras. They don't like cameras in the court because if you actually knew the rules and the codes and you watch these court cases go on, you would easily find that nobody's abiding by the law. Or some are. I've watched court TV. I heard Trump complaining about judges. I forgot. But the judge and the lawyers were abiding by the rules as far as in the courtroom, but nobody was citing the violations that went on outside the courtroom or in other cases. So it's pretty iffy. There's that judge in Texas. He's on the internet. He's famous for giving probable cause hearings. I nearly got arrested, and I got cited for contempt of court for promoting people to ask for a probable cause hearing. Why do they have to ask? It's a mandatory. Public defenders don't like that. They won't ask for a probable cause hearing. Private attorneys get a probable cause hearing. That's going to cost you some money, a few $1,000s. I stopped a few people from paying that. They're going out there and demanding a probable cause hearing. Lawyers getting mad, and judges, we want to replace your lawyer. No, I want him to do his fucking job. What sense is it replacing ineffective assistance of counsel with ineffective assistance of counsel? I want everybody to abide by the rules of professional conduct and the code of judicial conduct. If nobody's going to do it, what's the sense of coming here? It's no sense. You're breaking the laws in a court of law. I'm not stupid. I mean, I never said that, but I've had I didn't have them, but I listened to other people. This is the law. Judges and lawyers get really upset when you bring up their job descriptions, especially in a court of law. And when you do, cases get tossed. Like I said, happened to me even in eviction court. I was getting evicted because I was moving. Landlord got mad because they wanted me to continue with some remodeling and got mad because I wouldn't, and then owed me money for this remodeling and didn't want to pay me, and but the judge didn't give a shit. The lawyer didn't give. They knew that was legal harassment. Taking me to court to evict me because I was moving. I already had my stuff in storage. The only thing I need to do is find a place and move my bed. Move my bed and my clothes. That's all I had there. And landlord knew, but landlord didn't want me moving until I did all the repairs landlord found necessary. Wouldn't do it themselves. So I offered to do it, pay for it, as long as I was reimbursed. Never got reimbursed for the materials, never paid for my labor. They said that was on me because I lived there. You're supposed to do it because you live there. But the judge, when we went to court, told him to remove the eviction notice so I could move. The judge says, okay, this guy's trying to move. Let him move. Remove the eviction notice so he could move. They never did that. I had one place I tried to get a rental to. They wanted me to pay a year security deposit. The other places wanted at least 6 months. This place I'm at right now, they only wanted 4 months. 4 months security deposit. So I had to pay 4 months security deposit. That was the cheapest I could get. Because this lawyer didn't do what the judge told him to remove that illegal eviction notice. He didn't cite him for it being legal harassment. I don't know why. He didn't cite him for violating the rules of professional conduct. The oath. The lawyer would say, hey, well, I was working for landlord. No, you're working for the public. Sure, you're getting paid to help them out, but all lawyers are required to do what's in the public interest. And to legal harass a tenant, trying to prevent them from finding a place while they're trying to move with an eviction. You're using eviction notice to keep them from finding a place. Nobody's going to rent to them because of that eviction notice. You fool. What the hell is wrong with you? They were trying to move. They wanted out. And you didn't want them out so they could, until they finished doing all the remodeling and repairs. And no, that's not legal. But the judge gave me 90 days and he was really pissed. They laughed at me about the court fees. I didn't tell anybody I put in a fee waiver, so I didn't have to pay any court costs. I didn't tell them I put in for a jury trial. The judge was really ticked off when he found out, oh yeah, you want to take this to trial? The most I ever gave anybody was 21 days, and he's like bragging about his relentless persecution. The defendants, and he's and his consistent favoritism towards the landlords. It's violating the code of judicial conduct. But he didn't like the part about the jury trial when the clerk told him, while he was boasting about the very little he does for the tenants and everything he does for landlords. He was bragging about it. The clerk had to stop him and say, wait, and showed him. that I filed for a jury trial. And he told me, there's standards and, for picking a jury and, I say, I've been through that. I'm quite familiar. I'm ready, willing, and waiting. And I was going to point out to the jury all the malfeasance in that court. The violations of the codes, the violation of the rules. I was going to expose the conspiracy against rights under the color of law. But the judge, he didn't want it to go to trial. So he just told him, remove the eviction notice. They didn't. I was in a bad way. I had scheduled operations on my knee. I was living in a lot of pain. So I just paid that 4-month security deposit and moved because it was close to my doctor's office, because the landlord and the family there decided they would give anybody I had rides coming out there, from the doctor's office, picking me up, taking me to my doctor's visits. But they were doing anything they could to keep me from moving, from seeing my doctors. I got Karen calls, and then the police got mad and left because he wanted to arrest me. I said, sure, let's go. When we get there, I want to file a complaint. He said, for what? I said, you're filing a false report. I said, they made a false complaint, and you're going to file a false report made on a false complaint. I don't remember exactly what I said, but I started babbling about and making a false report. He says, well, you can't file a report if I don't. You can't file a report if I don't arrest you. And he left. And the people that were there got mad because I didn't just go with the cops. I said, well, he left. He left. Yeah, but you didn't go with him. Well, if I was supposed to, he would have took me. But that's ridiculous. People to make Karen calls. And it's found that these are unsubstantiated reports. There's laws against making false reports. The cop will come out there and arrest you because somebody made a false report, and then when you prove it's substantiated false report, they just walk away. No, it's the law to arrest them. But depending on who you're talking to, so that's what I do. I like to teach you all these laws that I think you should know, and the only way you'll ever get informed consent is if you be able to give informed consent is if you obtain the legal knowledge to make an informed decision. Okay, that's what I'm trying to do. In the rules of professional conduct, in the preamble, it says you need reasonable knowledge to make an informed decision, to give informed consent. But if you go through everything I showed you, you'll find that you actually need the legal knowledge to make an informed decision, to give informed consent. Okay, seriously doubt this knucklehead goes through all my videos. He's definitely not answering back because I'm questioning if he's a lawyer. I'm questioning if he's a lawyer. He knows violating the rules and the codes. He knows lying is against the law as far as the lawyers go. If you look up the rules of professional conduct and go through the preamble and read that, you can have a field day with any lawyer like I do. I have people laugh when I talk to lawyers. Judges in court, they don't like the law being expressed in court. They will literally lock you up. But that's if your lawyer knows you're going to say that. So don't tell your lawyer, just get a whole bunch of people, do like a group study. I used to get people to do that, a bunch of people get over and talk over everything. And there's nothing to argue. You're all gonna, as long as you use the letter of the law, you all see, say, and hear the same thing. That's the law. They gotta buy it word for word to the letter. And then go to court, make sure you got an audience with you that understands what you're doing. Hopefully everybody will bring the copy of the rules and the codes with you. And when a judge calls you up there, decides if, hey, you want to plead innocent or guilty. That's the question I have to you. Now, Your Honor, you just tell them, Your Honor, you got to, like this guy, cite my attorney for ineffective assistance of counsel. And then he's going to go over to the state's attorney or the opposing party and the judge. And then ask him, are you innocent or guilty of violating my rights of due process? Innocent or guilty of deprivation of rights. Innocent or guilty of a conspiracy against right because nobody here reported each other for violating the rules and the codes. Guilty or innocent? I haven't been in court for a long time for myself. A lot of people have challenged me, but nobody's ever taken me there. The last one was landlord. And landlord, lawyer just was dumbfounded, embarrassed. The judge went from snide and loud and snarky to submissive and silent. And it'll happen for anybody and everybody. People, take the rules and the codes with you, okay? You're literally going to war when you go to court there, and you're up against everybody in that courtroom. Every lawyer and every judge. So if you want to level out the playing field, take the rules and the codes with you. Don't tell none of the judge or none of the lawyers you're going to do that, and just go, and hey, I want to go over this. These are my rights. These are your constitutional duties. And if you don't do this, I'm going to cede it to the nation. We the people. Take a duty on you. Oh, seriously. I mean, come on. It's breaking the law to make somebody look like a criminal, is that a little ridiculous? I mean, it happens in criminal court, civil court, family court. I tried to talk to some people through some conservatorship. And if Britney Spears went over the rules of professional conduct and the code of judicial conduct, read about a conspiracy against rights under the color of law, deprivation of rights, she would find that all that money her family took from her, why would they do that? She earned it. Her dad even was suing her, so she would pay his lawyer because of his ill-gotten gains through the conservatorship. No. Everything, they violated her rights extensively. Not that I watched it, but I tried to help a few people before with, I think it was a guardianship. I tried to help a couple people here in Illinois with probate, but they wouldn't give me any information, which I told them I really didn't need. But I did give them copies of the rules and codes, places, the forms to file complaints. Tried discussing these other laws, and they said, why I gotta know this if my lawyers and the judges know that this is their job, this is the law, they have to do all this, and they know if they don't do it, they'll go to jail. Why do I have to know this? Because if you don't know it, they're not going to do it, and they're not going to go to jail for not doing it. They know you don't know their job description. They could do anything the hell they want. And you go there and just sit there and agree with them because you just don't want to know. I mean, if you really cared about your life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, you would take the time to know how to keep it and obtain it. There's no such thing as due process. There's no such thing as a fair trial. There's no such thing as effective assistance of counsel. if your lawyer, the one that's supposed to be representing you, hasn't specifically sat you down and went over the legal obligations of all lawyers and judges. Simple as that. Simple as that. Simple as that. Simple as that. That's all this guy's expressing. Nobody's doing their job. These are the legal requirements of all lawyers and judges. Everybody's guilty of depriving me of rights. And they're working together, obviously, because nobody's reporting each other for everybody depriving me of rights. So it's conspiracy to deprive rights. And under the color of law. Under the color of law is they're acting in their legal capacity to do illegal things. It just seems legal because you were in the courtroom. I did a video about under the color of law, a very short one. But you can look up under the color of law. Look up penalties. Violating the color of law, or, just look up the color of law. Okay, it'll tell you about the penalties. There's penalties for every law out there, people. I'm just showing you the laws and the penalties. And even on the other social media places I go, there's always somebody, there's always, oh no, and, trying to put me down for what? I just give you the law. I didn't write none of it. I read it to you word for word, to the letter, as required by the letter of the law, because any violations of the letter of the law is fines, removal from public service, and incarceration. And even though I'm not in public service, I could still be issued with fines and incarceration if I were to put any false accusations in a court of law. I'm not going to do that. Because lawyers and judges will have me locked up for doing it, but they won't lock each other up for doing it. But anyways, damn, I wish everybody has a court case right now. If it's a criminal case, you'll say what he say. If it's anything other than a civil or a criminal case, you'll replace the state's attorney with the opposing party. I forgot which rule it is. Fairness to the opposing party and counsel. And that doesn't happen. Okay. And I'm doing my best to get you all to know your rights. The only way you're going to know them is it involves a lot of reading. And if you lack the reading comprehension of a fifth grader, find a fifth grader. If you can't read or write, find a fifth grader that can read or write. Or at least somebody with a reading comprehension level of a fifth grader. Listen, if I understood the Constitution when I was in fifth grade, I'm pretty sure anybody else can. I don't doubt your intellect. I don't doubt your capacity to think. And I'm not trying to convince you won't understand the law. I'm trying to convince you will. And that lawyer guy will probably tell you that's not what it means, but if he starts saying anything other than what's written, that's violating the letter of the law. There's fines. The penalties are fines, removal from public service, and incarceration. Okay. But that knucklehead, he's just stuck on this post. It's just this one post without even thinking about. If he was such an intelligent person, he would have thought about Googling all these laws this guy was talking about and seeing if what he was saying was correct. And he wouldn't even have to do that if he went through my other videos, my other posts, and seeing I already posted these laws that this guy used when he said this. He just threw a bunch of laws at him. Everybody, the judge didn't cite the the public defender for ineffective assistance of counsel, the prosecutor for prosecutorial misconduct, and himself for judicial misconduct. The judge literally broke a whole lot of laws there, which unequivocally proves a conspiracy against rights under the color of law. And there's penalties for that. So Mr. Lawyer, what's his name? Ask him that. Pound his page. I really don't like people coming here and say, jumping on my post and contradicting the law. This guy. Anyone can try. 99% will not succeed or have a clue what they are doing. If you don't know the law, but I'm giving them to you. He won't. He won't. So you won't have a clue what you're doing, but I'm giving you every clue. I'm giving you every clue. I'm giving you every law. And all you got to do is read them. Once you read them, you'll understand them, especially if you apply the letter of the law. And that's what makes it real easy on everybody. Once they read the law, the letter of the law, and penalties for violating the letter of the law. And people go mad, they go nuts, and they start using every law they could find. That's what I want you to do. But stop by and ask this guy. And I don't know what he's trying to prove.
And the state's attorney are therefore required to cite you for judicial misconduct upon failure to do so. Informed consent is required before these proceedings can go forward. It is required I have reasonable knowledge to give informed consent, and that reasonable knowledge would be informing me exactly what due process is, and that's explained in the rules of professional conduct and the code of judicial conduct. A fair trial would require everyone in a court of law making sure that I have reasonable knowledge to give informed consent. Now, effective assistance of counsel is a double-edged sword and cuts every way you swing. Every attorney is required to abide by and enforce the rules of conduct as well as judges. Every lawyer and judge are required to abide by and enforce the code of judicial as well. Preferential treatment is forbidden in every court of law, and thus far you have given my attorney and the state's attorney preferential treatment, and they you. Let's not forget the requirements of a quick and speedy trial, which has limits. No one has explained any of this to me. With this being recently discovered, I ask that this case be dismissed with prejudice and for all of you to do what's required of law and report each other to the proper authorities. Thank you, Your Honor. My attorney for ineffective assistance of counsel. Reporting misconduct is mandatory in both the Code of Judicial Conduct as well as the rules of professional conduct. The state's attorney should as well then, Your Honor. You took an oath of public service and violation of that oath is treason. Not to cite my attorney and the state's attorney for violating the rules of professional conduct is a violation of that oath. In judicial conduct, you are also legally obligated and required by the Code of Conduct to do so. My attorney and the state's attorney are therefore required to cite you for judicial misconduct upon failure to do so. Informed consent is required before these proceedings can go forward. It is required I have reasonable knowledge to give informed consent, and that reasonable knowledge would be informing me exactly what due process is, and that's explained in the rules of professional conduct and the Code of Judicial Conduct. A fair trial would require everyone in a court of law making sure that I have reasonable knowledge to give informed consent. Now, effective assistance of counsel is a double-edged sword and cuts every way you swing. Every attorney is required to abide by and enforce the rules of conduct as well as judges. Every lawyer and judge are required to abide by and enforce the Code of Judicial as well. Preferential treatment is forbidden in every court of law, and thus far you have given my attorney and the state's attorney preferential treatment, and they you. Let's not forget the requirements of a quick and speedy trial, which has limits. No one has explained any of this to me. With this being recently discovered, I ask that this case be dismissed with prejudice and for all of you to do what's required of law and report each other to the proper authorities. Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay, he threw a whole bunch of laws at him. So people, tell me, who's the criminal? Or criminals? Thank you. Thank you for listening.